Stewart-Haas Racing has been handed more massive penalties for messing with the roof rail deflectors, and Hendrick Motorsports will field their Xfinity program once again in 2024. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just show them those really quickly. We're first going to take a ton of paint schemes that have been released over the last couple days. Let's go ahead and just show them straight into it. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Derek Cross's 2024 Western States Florida scheme that we'll see this weekend at Las Vegas. This paint scheme's decent in my opinion, not absolutely fantastic. I do love the orange on the car though. Hopefully Derek Cross can have a solid run though with this car in his debut at Las Vegas. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Josh Berry's 2024 Mobile 1 Take 5 scheme that we'll see this weekend at Las Vegas. This is about the same thing as Kevin Harvick had last year, so I don't really have much comment on it. It's decent though. Hopefully we'll have a good run with this scheme. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Thad Moffitt's 2024 South Point schemes that we'll see this weekend at Las Vegas. I absolutely love this scheme. I love the colors of it. It looks very similar to some of their South Point schemes we've seen in the past. It looks really good in my opinion. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Corey LaJoie's 2024 USANA scheme that we'll see this weekend at Las Vegas. This looks pretty good in my opinion. Love the colors on it, like the blue and like everything about the scheme overall. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is William Byron's 2024 HP scheme. This is a massive upgrade compared to last year's HP scheme. This weekend what blue will see with this weekend, I believe at Bristol Motor Speedway as well. It's solid. Hopefully William Byron can have a good run with this scheme this weekend. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Eric Jones' 2024 Dollar Tree scheme that I believe we're going to see this weekend at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. Very good scheme in my opinion. It's one of my favorite ones up to this point this year. It looks pretty solid. It looks spectacular. And glad to see that he'll have this scheme for this weekend at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Daniel Suarez. As it was reported by Adam Stern, I believe it was on Tuesday morning, or Monday, that Daniel Suarez made the front page of today's Reform newspaper in Mexico. That is really huge considering Daniel Suarez is really popular in Mexico. It's really huge to see of him picking up a second career victory at Atlanta in one of the best finishes in NASCAR history. It was really cool to see Daniel Suarez was able to make it into a newspaper in Mexico. I think it made it many newspapers in Mexico last year, and it's really good to see the sport growing outside of the United States. So really happy about this and glad to see he was able to make it into this newspaper in Mexico. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Chevy. As it was reported by Joe Strigley first, that Chevrolet has won the first 6 races of 2024. This is the first time a manufacturer has swept the first 2 weeks in NASCAR Cup Series, NASCAR history in general. Going back to Daytona, you had Austin Hill, who's won the first 2 races in Xfinity. You, of course, had Kyle Busch win the Truck Series race at Atlanta this week at Daytona. For the Truck Series race, you had Nick Sanchez win. And then for Cup, you had, of course, William Byron win the Daytona 500 and Daniel Suarez win Atlanta Motor Speedway. This is very huge for Chevrolet, and to see that Chevy continues to start the year off on a really good footing, I think is really awesome and incredible overall. To see that Chevrolet continues their run. In fact, they've won the last 7 straight races going back to Phoenix last year when Ross Chastain won at Phoenix. So they're going for their 8th, 9th, and 10th straight wins in a row. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the tire for Las Vegas. As it was reported by Bob Pockrass yesterday that the tire for Las Vegas has a new right side tire for this weekend, hoping to give more timing window and more tuning window for the teams. Last year, during the last time we were at Las Vegas Motor Speedway, we saw a lot of tire trouble and a lot of tire issues really come into play, which is why they're hoping that with this new compound that I believe they're going to be using at Texas and a couple other races like Kansas as well. The hope is that tire issues won't come into play because one of the issues we've seen is that these teams will run a lot of these lower air pressures and then they'll have tire issues and tire trouble and they'll likely have to go to the back of the field. Overall, I think this is a very good move on their part and their end to give these guys a little more of a tuning window. Obviously, I think they should have a little more practice than they're being given. But the fact that they at least will have a little more, hopefully, of a tuning window will hopefully not cause tire issues to come into play. But I would not be shocked or surprised if we see some tire issues come into play this weekend at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Jose Bautista. As it was announced on Monday afternoon that Jose Bautista is going to drive the pace car at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. Jose Bautista, for those who don't know, was one of the better players in the MLB in the mid to late 2010s and was able to win a lot of games and also was able to have a lot of home runs and a lot of big moments, including in the postseason as well. Jose Bautista is getting a really great opportunity here. I think he's been residing in the Las Vegas area, if I'm not mistaken, which is why he's getting this chance and opportunity to drive this pace car at Las Vegas. Overall, hopefully he does a good job driving the pace car and just don't crash it at this particular moment. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the 2025 Daytona 500. As the date for the 2025 Daytona 500 has been officially announced. It'll be on February 16th of next year. It'll be 2 days earlier than this year's race, which was on February 19th, technically, though the race was originally supposed to be on February 18th. It was this year on February 19th because it got postponed a day later due to the weather coming into play. Hopefully this time around, weather will not be a major issue. I think they also announced the August race at Daytona as well, which I think is going to be on August 24th. Overall, it's really good to see, and again, just really happy to see that the Daytona 500 date has been officially announced. I think this is the earliest they've announced the Daytona 500 when the next date is going to be, which means hopefully when it comes to next year's schedule, we can get it out a little bit quicker and a little bit earlier in 2024. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Noah Gragson. As Noah Gragson has a new sponsor in 2024. The sponsor is Fantic, which will sponsor him this weekend at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. I also believe that Fantic is going to sponsor Cole Custer, I think, at Texas Motor Speedway, but I can't remember exactly. Fantic is an automotive company for performance parts, so it's really cool to see that Noah Gragson continues to pick up sponsorship. He's brought some companies in. He's, of course, been sponsored by Rush Truck Centers, but he's also brought Black Rifle Coffee back. He's brought True Timber back. He's brought a ton of companies back in recent years and recent seasons. Overall, I think this is very, very exciting to see and glad to see that Noah Gragson has picked up another sponsor for 2024. Hopefully Noah Gragson can make the most of it and have a really strong run with these sponsors this weekend at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Sonoma Raceway. As it was confirmed by Sonoma Raceway's Twitter account that the repave they've been working on is officially complete. Over this offseason, Sonoma Raceway has been working on a repave, which I think has been needed for a very long time because I think the last time Sonoma got repaved was all the way back, I think, in the early to maybe even the late 90s. So basically, it's been a long time since the track has been needing a repave. And the hope is that can give these guys a little more grip and the racing can be a lot better. If you brought IndyCar there, the racing would be a lot crazier. It seems like every time we have a repave and IndyCar goes there, the racing tends to be really, really crazy. Hopefully, we can see some really, really good racing this year with this repave. I really want to see some fun. Again, I want to see some good racing in Sonoma. And again, I wish we were racing there in the spring because I think it would be fun to be out there in the spring. Obviously, we're not going there in the spring, which is really, really disappointing and really, really unfortunate. But I think the racing will be fun out there. Hopefully, they schedule for the West Coast Swing next year. I don't see them moving Atlanta from the second race, so maybe they can move Sonoma to like the fourth or fifth race of the year next year. I think that'd be really cool and exciting. Nonetheless, so it's good to see that the repave that they've been working on at Sonoma Raceway has been officially completed. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Sage Karam. As it was reported by Joseph Wrigley and many reporters in the industry that Sage Karam is going to drive the 32 for Jordan Anderson Racing this weekend at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. Sage Karam has already made a start so far in 2024. He ran a course at Daytona International Speedway where I believe he ended up crashing out near the end of the event. Sage Karam, in my opinion, is a pretty underrated driver who can always get the best out of equipment. And Jordan Anderson Racing so far this year has had pretty solid runs. Parker Retzlaff is coming off having back-to-back top 5 finishes. And in general, this team has showed some really strong pace and really strong speed so far in 2024. Hopefully, Sage Karam can really good this weekend, and we'll see what he can do with the organization this weekend at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. Hopefully, Sage can have a good run with Jordan Anderson Racing this weekend. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Pato O'Ward. As it was reported by Nathan Brown from the Indy Star that Pato O'Ward has received a 2-year, $10.2 million extension with McLaren, according to court documents from basically some of the court cases from Alex Palou. Pato O'Ward has been with McLaren at least since I think 2018 or 2019 or maybe 2020, and Pato O'Ward absolutely deserves this contract extension. To me, I think this is a really, really good move on their part, considering I would consider Pato O'Ward to be one of the better drivers in IndyCar. Yes, I know he did not win a race last year, but he did come very close to winning races in 2023. And I do expect that Pato O'Ward will have a really good chance and a really strong opportunity to compete for wins and victories this season as well. I really hope he can make the best out of it this year and go out there and contend for wins and victories. Because like I said, I think Pato O'Ward has the complete possibility of getting it done if he has really good equipment, which he does have fantastic equipment. He's won quite a few races before. He had one of the fastest cars at the Indy 500 last year, sadly crashed out near the end of the event. I believe, though, that he has a really strong chance and a really great opportunity to get the victory with this team this year. Hopefully, Pato O'Ward can be a championship threat because if he's got the equipment, I think he will be a championship threat and contender this year with Arrow McLaren or McLaren altogether. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about He Gets Us. As it was announced, I believe it was on Monday evening, that He Gets Us will sponsor Eric Almirola for 8 races in 2024. They're also going to sponsor Ty Gibbs for 6 Cup Series races in 2024 and 2 NASCAR Xfinity Series races, confirming that Ty Gibbs is going to also run as Circuit Americas in the NASCAR Xfinity Series and the Chicago Street Course. He Gets Us has been with Joe Gibbs Racing, I think, since 2022 or 2023, and they were back to sponsor Eric Almirola for a majority of the races. Remember, Eric Almirola is going to be running this weekend at Las Vegas Motor Speedway, so he's definitely going to be a major threat and contender to get it done with JGR, but I think he also has a good chance to win at a lot of other tracks. The rest of the schedule has not been announced at this point for what races Eric Almirola is going to run. I would imagine that Richmond is going to be the first race that he's going to run the 20, because remember, John Hunter Nemechek is running the first 5 races of the year. But I am very happy. I mean, He Gets Us is a very controversial sponsor. Yes, I know a lot of people have had their opinions on it, especially on social media. But it is decent to see that a company like He Gets Us, at least a company that's a sponsor, can stick around and work with Eric Almirola and Ty Gibbs. Hopefully, can make the best out of it and have some good runs in the scheme that they're talking about Eric Almirola. And we'll see what happens this year in 2025 for especially Eric Almirola and Ty Gibbs. And it's also cool to see a Ty Gibbs back in Xfinity, which I think Ty Gibbs will have a really good chance and opportunity to go out there and win with that sponsorship as well in Xfinity and also Cup as well, because I do expect that Ty Gibbs will probably have a breakout season in 2024. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Atlanta photo finish. Now, basically, for the first time in a very long time, the Atlanta photo finish actually was on SportsCenter. According to Adam Stern, the Atlanta photo finish was the most viral moment in NASCAR since the Hail Melon. Obviously, the Hail Melon that took place back in 2022 at Martinsville. And it was number 10 on SportsCenter. Now, I do want to say one thing about this. I am very happy to see that NASCAR got on SportsCenter once again. I think that it's good to see that it did end up on SportsCenter. Here's my biggest gripe and problem, though. How is this moment number 10? You're telling me that this moment is behind a normal, traditional softball play. If you were talking about maybe Caitlin Clark being number 1, I would completely understand it. But this minimum should have been in the top 3 or top 4. The fact that this got behind a routine softball play and a routine goal in hockey, you're telling me that this was not a more better than that? Because in my personal opinion, this Atlanta photo finish, which is arguably one of the best finishes in NASCAR Cup Series history, you're telling me that this finish is not even, in the top 2 or 3 moments of the week? How does that not even happen? It doesn't make any sense to me. I think it's a bad move on SportsCenter's end. Though don't get me wrong, I am very happy to see that we did end up on SportsCenter, but the fact it did not get any higher than it did, I think is absolutely BS. I think we should have been at least a little bit higher than we were, but that is just my honest opinion on that. I personally think we should have been at least a little higher overall, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Trucks and Xfinity Atlanta TV ratings from this past weekend. According to Fox, they say that the NASCAR Truck Series race scored 914,000 viewers. That is up 13% from last year's race. In addition to that, for the Xfinity Series, it scored 1.19 million viewers. That is up 17% from last year's race at Atlanta Motor Speedway, which I think got 1.01 million viewers last year. So it was up nearly 100,000 viewers from last year's race. I think for the Truck Series is up about 20 to 30,000 from last year as well. This is a really good sign that at least the core fan base in NASCAR is growing, because usually when you have the core fan base, those are the ones that usually tune in the Xfinity Series and the Truck Series. Even though the races may not been as good, I still think it is really good to see that those ratings at least went up in the lower series, because if you need those ratings in the lower series to go up if your sport is going to survive long term, it's really good to see. It's potentially more money coming in as well for the lower series, and hopefully the momentum for all of these series can continue going in a week. Even though the races may not have been as good as the Cup Series race was, I still believe that it's really good to see the ratings up for the Truck Series and the Xfinity Series as well. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Mike Joy. Now, Mike Joy was on Sirius XM NASCAR Radio, I believe, on Monday, and he basically calls the 2024 Atlanta finish the greatest finish in NASCAR history that didn't involve cars crashing across the finish line. Obviously, there's some of the other great finishes like 2003 Carolina Dodge GLS 400, which is arguably the best finish in NASCAR history, but of course, he did have Kurt Busch and Ricky Craven that technically crashed coming across the line. Of course, you have 2007 Daytona 500 finish between Mark Martin and Kevin Harvick, but that, of course, there was a lot of cars wrecking behind, and Clint Bowyer was flipping upside down. I think that this, in my opinion, is one of the best finishes. The 2024 Atlanta finish is one of the best finishes in NASCAR Cup Series history. 3 wide across the line, only 7 1,000ths between the top 3, which is the closest finish for the top 3 in NASCAR Cup Series history. And in general, overall, I do 100% agree with Mike Joy. I think there's some other classic finishes. Sure, you got the 2018 Chicagoland finish, which is one of the best finishes ever. But of course, you had Kyle Larson and Kyle Busch crashing each other while battling for the win. To me, I think that Mike Joy is absolutely correct on this. This is one of the best finishes ever, and I think that this is a finish that we're going to be talking about for many years to come. And I hope fans continue to tune in, because Las Vegas, I think, is also going to be very, very fun. Maybe just like Daytona and Atlanta. I know the finish at Daytona wasn't great, but I hope that we can continue the momentum we've had to start this year, and hopefully we can have some really strong and great races this upcoming weekend at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. Hopefully the racing can be solid and really good overall. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Jason Miller. As it was announced yesterday in the penalty report that Jason Miller has been suspended 2 races for Kyle Weatherman altercation. For those who saw on social media after the NASCAR Xfinity Series race, Jason Miller, who is a crew chief for J.J. Yeley at SS Greenlight Racing, went up and confronted Kyle Weatherman and tried to fight him. Usually NASCAR does not like when pit crew members, including crew chiefs, try to go and fight the drivers. This comes from an incident that basically took place about halfway through the race. I think it was at the beginning of stage number 2, when Kyle Weatherman unintentionally got into the back of J.J. Yeley. And after the race, a fight and altercation happened. I really don't understand why Jason Miller, the crew chief of this team, was upset over a little bit of a spin. It wasn't like Kyle Weatherman intentionally ran into the back of their team. It was an accident. And even on the radio, Kyle Weatherman apologized. But then you got Jason Miller and then J.J. Yeley basically said, they better have Bill Money ready for me because I'm going to go kick his ass after the race. I never really understood why they got upset over a super speedway wreck. And this is not the first time we've seen crew chiefs and people fight. You go back to last year with Matt Crafton and Nick Sanchez, when Matt Crafton pretty much sucker punched Nick Sanchez after the race. I think this is the right call and right decision. I can't remember who exactly is going to be the substitute crew chief for this week for him, but to me, I think this was the right decision and call. Again, NASCAR usually frowns upon crew members going in and trying to fight, and I think this is the right decision, the right call in NASCAR's end, because in my opinion, it is ridiculous that a crew chief got this man upset over a super speedway wreck. I think this is the right call and right decision overall, in my honest opinion, for them to go ahead and penalize him. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Front Row Motorsports. As it was reported by Bob Pockers on Monday that Front Row Motorsports will not appeal the disqualification for Lane Riggs' truck at Atlanta. Remember, Lane Riggs was unfortunately disqualified after the Craftsman Truck Series race at Atlanta Motor Speedway for the windshield fasteners not being secured on the truck. This is not the first time that Front Row Motorsports has been disqualified in the last year, because remember, you go back a few races ago, Homestead Miami Speedway, when Zane Smith was still driving the number 38 truck, we saw them get a disqualification there for basically the same thing. Now, Lane Riggs was not going to get a really good finish regardless. He was going to finish, I think, like 22nd or 23rd, and maybe a little bit higher in points. But right now, Lane Riggs is 31st in full season points, and is pretty much getting to the point now where, yes, I know we still have a long way to go, but he's almost going to have to win a race at this point if he is going to make the playoffs. Again, I think they're making the right decision not to appeal it, though, because they were not going to win a disqualification appeal, because the appeal board has changed a lot in major significant ways, especially in the last year, and how NASCAR rules on that disqualification board now. So I think it's right for them to not go ahead and appeal it. Again, I do feel bad for Front Row. I don't feel bad because they're trying to make a competitive advantage. But man, Lane Riggs has been extremely unlucky to start the year and the season up to this point. Hopefully his luck can turn around and things can go better for him going forward into the year. There's some good tracks coming up for Lane Riggs, though. There's Martinsville and some short tracks coming up, which I think will give Lane Riggs a really good advantage and opportunity to be competitive at those select racetracks. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Luke Fenhaus. Now, it was reported by Joseph Straley of TobyChristie.com that Luke Fenhaus will make his Truck Series debut at some point in 2024 with ThorSport Racing. Luke Fenhaus, for those who don't know, has been with the Chevy Group for many, many years. Last year, he drove for Pinnacle Racing Group in multiple races, but he was very, very solid and got, I think, 1 or 2 victories in ARCA, including, I believe, at Iowa Speedway, or came close to winning at Iowa Speedway. Luke Fenhaus, in my opinion, very talented driver. I think Luke is only 18 or 19 years old, and I believe he'll drive his 66 truck because Connor Jones is not going to run the full season of that truck. He's only running 13 races, including this weekend, and obviously Atlanta did not go very well for him. I think that Luke Fenhaus will do really good with ThorSport. I'm not expecting him to win by any stretch of imagination, but I think that Luke Fenhaus will do a pretty good job with that team this week. And I think the goal, ultimately, whatever race they decide, I'm hoping it's Milwaukee, to be honest, because I think Milwaukee would be a really good track for him to run. I would imagine it might be a short track maybe in the postseason as well. That would probably be a track to go with, like Bristol, perhaps, because I think he'd do a really good job there. But again, I'm really happy for Luke Fenhaus. I'm really glad to see that he's getting the chance and opportunity to get behind the wheel of ThorSport Racing equipment, one of the best equipment in the field, just won the championship last year, and I really hope that Luke Fenhaus can make the best out of it with them this upcoming year and this upcoming season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Christopher Bell. As it was announced on Monday morning that Christopher Bell is going to drive the one truck for Tricon Garage this weekend at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. He'll be one of 3 NASCAR Cup Series drivers driving this weekend in Las Vegas. You've got Kyle Busch driving the 7 truck for Spire Motorsports, which of course he won last week at Atlanta Motor Speedway. And we've got Zane Smith driving the 91 truck for McAnally Hilgeman Racing. I think one of these 3 drivers will most likely go ahead and win the race. As for Chris Bell getting back behind the wheel, this is a really good opportunity for him, and he's going to be in really strong equipment. Again, Tricon Garage has been extremely fast on the 1.5 miles in the last couple of years, and I think Chris Bell is absolutely a major threat and a major contender to get it done this weekend at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. I think minimum, he's going to finish inside the top 5. But maximum, I would not be shocked or surprised if he wins the Las Vegas, considering Christopher Bell historically, at least in the Cup Series especially, has ran historically very good and really strong with Joe Gibbs Racing. And has ran good here in the Truck Series as well in the past. So therefore, I think he'll be a major threat, and I definitely think he'll be a pretty big contender to get it done this weekend in the Truck Series race on Friday night. I think he's going to have a really good chance and opportunity to get it done this weekend at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. I expect him to be a major threat and contender to get it done with Tricon Garage. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about charters once again. Now, there has been a lot of talk about the charter system, especially over the last couple of seasons. And according to Adam Stern, he puts in from the original report that many of NASCAR team owners are in their 70s and 80s. and at least some of them believe that this charter negotiation is their chance to lock in enterprise value that can last through their family for generations. This is definitely very, very true. You look at the average age of a lot of these owners, a lot of them are in their 70s and 80s. Rick Hendrick is in his 70s. Roger Penske just turned 87 about a week and a half ago. You've got, I think, Joe Gibbs, who's 81 or 82. You do have some younger owners like Justin Marks, who's 42. You have Denny Hamlin, of course, who just turned 43 this past year. And you've got some younger owners that are coming into play in NASCAR. But a lot of the owners in NASCAR, like also Richard Childress, who is going to be turning, I believe, 80 this year, these guys are getting a lot older and they're not getting any younger. And the hope is that with the charter agreement getting finalized, they're hoping they can also get a lot more money as well out of the charter agreement. To me, it doesn't surprise or shock me that a lot of these older owners especially are wanting a lot more money to come from this said charter agreement. I think it's going to be very interesting to watch this charter agreement as time goes through. We now know that when it comes to negotiation table, the teams are wanting another 7 years. Well, NASCAR is offering 7 years on this charter agreement, basically how long the TV deal is from 2025 to 2031, which of course we're going to get the CW, we're going to get Amazon, and we're going to get a lot of different companies coming into play as well for the new TV deal. To me, it's not a shock and surprise to see this, and overall, I'm glad to see that some of these owners do want to bring a lot more money into play. To me, it also could open up doors for new ownership to come, and maybe Junior Motorsports comes into play in the future, bring someone like a Matt DiBenedetto in to drive for the team, or some of their drivers in. As we know, Dale Jr. is interested. Again, it's going to be very interesting to see how things run, especially with the charter agreement and the charter deal, and we'll see whenever the charter deal gets finalized, because we're still in negotiations for that. I do think it's going to get finalized in the not-so-distant future, but we'll have to wait and see when this charter system and charter agreement does finally, in fact, end up getting finalized for NASCAR. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Shane Van Gisbergen once again. As Shane Van Gisbergen does have another new sponsor for this weekend at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. The sponsor is Focus Health. Focus Health has been with the Trackhouse family since the start of the season. They've sponsored Zane Smith for a couple races. They sponsored him, I think, in the Daytona 500, or they didn't sponsor 500, but they're going to be sponsoring him, I think, this weekend at Las Vegas, and they also sponsored him at Atlanta Motor Speedway. And now Shane Van Gisbergen has picked up another sponsor, because he's going to be sponsored by Quad Lock this season later in the year, which has sponsored SVG in the last year or so, and also WeatherTech will be working with SVG in many races as well. It is really good to see that Shane Van Gisbergen is continuing to pick up new sponsors and new funding for 2024. Shane Van Gisbergen's had a really good start to the year. He's ninth in the points for the Xfinity Series at the moment right now. And also Shane Van Gisbergen just picked up his first career Xfinity top 5 finish. I believe that Shane Van Gisbergen will have a really strong year this year, and I think he is going to win a couple races with the organization and the team at Kaulig Racing. And I think that is eventually going to lead to him going Cup Series racing in the not-so-distant future. Again, having a new sponsor coming into play and to work with him for 2024, I think is really good to see. And I don't know how many races Focus Health is going to sponsor Shane Van Gisbergen. It might just be Las Vegas, but we would have to imagine, because we know he's going to have a Wendy's car at some point this year as well, by the way. I would imagine maybe also Red Bull coming back and sponsoring him as well. I think it's really good to see, though, and nonetheless, I'm just happy overall to see that Shane Van Gisbergen does have a new sponsor, and hopefully you do really good with this new sponsorship and new funding of Focus Health at his first true mile-and-a-half oval. I think it'll be pretty solid and pretty competitive, though, with the team this weekend at Las Vegas Motor Speedway, because Kaulig Racing historically has been pretty solid at Las Vegas Motor Speedway in the past. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Joey Logano. As it was announced yesterday in the penalty report that Joey Logano has been fined $10,000 for glove safety violations. For those who were paying attention over the weekend, Joey Logano got a pretty easy penalty, in my opinion, which is $10,000 for a basic glove safety violation. Now, what is this glove safety violation? Well, there's two major penalties that come from this. One is something in the SFI rating. It was basically out of the SFI rating, which spends a new role that NASCAR has been having with their gloves, especially as of late in their safety equipment as well. The other big thing is that Joey Logano had actually webbing in the glove. which is a competitive advantage. Now, the reason Joey Logano did not get a points penalty and only got a fine, from what I can understand, is because of the fact that Joey Logano was a competition advantage that he received. The reason Joey Logano did not get a bigger penalty that he actually received is because of the fact that Joey Logano basically was supposed to serve a pass-through penalty, but obviously, of course, he didn't end up serving that pass-through penalty because a crash happened on lap 2, which, by the way, he was at the time serving that pass-through penalty. But I am a little shocked that Joey Logano also, at the same time, did not get a massive penalty, like a 10-point penalty, but at the same token, same time as well. I'm glad that Joey Logano is not getting like a 30 or 40-point penalty like SHR is receiving for basically just gloves. It's not like Joey Logano modified a race car, it was just gloves. It's not the team's fault that a driver was getting penalized, and I don't think any other members are getting penalized. I think Logano's the only one from Team Penske there that got a penalty, and I don't expect an appeal. He'll probably take $10,000, which is going to, of course, going to go to the NASCAR Foundation. So at least it's going to go somewhere for a good cause. To me, overall, it's a good decision to penalize. I mean, you can't have this as part of the rule book. You're not supposed to use it as competitive advantage, especially webbing between the glove like a catcher's mitt, which apparently this webbing had been seen at Daytona. So it's interesting to see that Joe Logano has been finally penalized for this. We'll see what happens in the future, and we'll see if Logano tries to do it again. But I would imagine it's something that will keep your eyes out on, especially when it comes to penalties in the not-so-distant future. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Hailie Deegan. Now, Bob Poggers put an article surrounding Hailie Deegan because we're going to the track where she ran extremely good in her Xfinity Series debut, finishing in 13th. And Bob Poggers was wondering in this article whether or not Hailie Deegan will have her breakout season in 2024. Look, it's no secret that Hailie Deegan had struggled in the Craftsman Truck Series over the last couple years from 2021 to 2023, where she only scored, I believe, 5 or 6 top 10 finishes, which is not that good, all things considered. But I think a lot of fans like myself are hoping that she can run better in Xfinity. Now, so far, the season has not gone very well for her with a best finish 27th, but obviously it's super speedway racing, so it's really, you can't really take too much stock into 2 races early in the season. That being said, I want to answer the question. I don't think Hailie Deegan is going to have, let's say, a breakout season. Now, I think that this will be her best performance at Las Vegas. In fact, I think she has a really great chance and a really great opportunity here to finish inside the top 10 or maybe even, well, I think the top 10 or top 15 is really possible. This is a track where she historically ran solid at in the Truck Series as well and had some pretty good pace. She's qualified pretty well here in trucks, and in general, she has had some good pace here in Xfinity as well in her only start. So I think that this will be her potential best run of the year to start off the year. Ultimately, I think her goal is to have a lot of top 15 finishes and try to even get some top 10s. I hope she can finish in the top 20 in standings. I think she's like 30th or 31st in points currently at the moment. So she's not in a really good position in the owner's points right now. But if she comes here to Las Vegas and runs really good, then we might be talking. Look, I like Hailie Deegan. I know there's a lot of pressure on her this year to perform. I know it's technically a multi-year deal for her. Hopefully she can turn the season around. I know we're only 2 races in, so it's too early to judge. Hopefully Hailie Deegan can have a really big turnaround performance and can run very, very good this weekend at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. Ford historically been good. We know how strong SHR cars have generally been. So hopefully those SHR performance cars can go to her car and she can run really good because Brett Moffitt did run pretty good in the 25 car the last time we were here at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. Hopefully she can run really, really good this weekend. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Xfinity. Now, it was reported by Adam Stern from the Sports Business Journal that according to him, this could be the final year of the Xfinity Series name in NASCAR after a decade. But Comcast is in talks to stay on as a sponsor of the sport. Now, Xfinity has been basically the title brand sponsor of the Xfinity Series since 2015 when they took over from the NASCAR Nationwide Series back in 2015, and they have been there for 10 years. Xfinity's also been a major branding in NASCAR since around 2019 and 2020, when they have been basically the title sponsor of the Xfinity Series. when I look at basically the branding, I would not be shocked or surprised if we see some new branding coming in. Now, it is still possible that Xfinity could still be the name of the Xfinity series, but with them going over to the CW and leaving NBC at the end of this year, I think that's another big reason why I don't think Xfinity is going to stay around, because Xfinity is part of the Comcast brand, and of course, like I just mentioned, Xfinity is going to CW, so could NASCAR potentially be moving the secondary series to the CW series, or could there be a potential chance and possibility that the name switches perhaps from the CW, from the Xfinity series, maybe to the Busch series? Obviously, we've been seeing a lot of major rebrandings recently. Remember, Craftsman came back, has been the sponsor for the Craftsman Truck Series the last 2 seasons, though the Craftsman Truck Series is not the same as it used to be years ago when Craftsman was the main sponsor. I believe that there's a chance that Busch could come in and take over as a major sponsor. As for Xfinity, I think they will stick around in NASCAR. I don't think they're going anywhere anytime soon. And I do believe that they are going to stick around and be part of the sport for the foreseeable and the long-term future. But to me, I think it's going to be very fun to watch and see what happens when it comes to these contract talks with Xfinity, among other things, because this is one of the biggest stories to pay attention to, is what is going to be the title sponsor of the secondary series, because for many years it was Busch from like 1982 up until 2007, and then of course it switched over to Nationwide in 2008 up until 2014, and Xfinity took over. So whatever sponsor comes in, which again, if you want my early prediction, I think Busch absolutely has to be a major front runner for that. They're not sponsoring, as Ross just saying, as much as they sponsor Kevin Harvick at this point. So I would imagine that is potentially going to be a big thing to watch out for in regards to that. Nonetheless, so I'm really glad to see that. I'm really sucks to see that Xfinity may no longer be the main sponsor of the Xfinity series, but it's good to see that they're at least in talks to stay in the sport, because we've seen a lot of major sponsors leave over the last couple of years. M&M's, you think about Lowe's, you think about Home Depot, you even think about Kellogg's to an extent, have all left the sport in the last couple of years. So I think if the Xfinity sticks around, at least is a good thing, but I don't think the Xfinity series is going to be the name of the secondary series. My prediction right now is that Busch is going to take over, and it's going to become the Busch series starting in 2025. I think that's what it's going to be called when they go, in fact, switch over to the CW. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the Atlanta TV ratings. Now, according to Fox Sports and Adam Stern, Fox scored 4.46 million viewers at Atlanta. That is up 33% from Atlanta last year. Granted, that was in the middle of March, when the ratings do tend to go down a little bit as we get farther into the season. But it was up 33% from Atlanta last year, and it's up 5% from the race at Fontana, which of course was the second race last year. That is still absolutely huge, because I think the number last year is 4.316. So that means that we had a near 150,000 viewer increase from 2023 up to 2024 for the second race of the year. This is absolutely huge. And I imagine if the Daytona 500 had actually been at the scheduled time when the race was supposed to happen, I would imagine we would have broken the record for what we had in like the last 10 years. I don't think we would have gotten like 20 million like it did in 2006, but I think we probably would have gotten close to 10 million viewers for the event this year, which would have been really huge for the Daytona 500. We still got 6 million viewers, which is solid, by the way, for a race that got delayed to Monday. But when you look at these TV ratings, couple things to get confirmed here. One, I would imagine with them having an increase in TV ratings and not having a decrease in TV ratings, I would imagine that you're going to see Atlanta be the second race going forward into the future. And while I wasn't a big fan at first of keeping Atlanta the second race of the season, I actually am a fan of doing that now. Now, could we maybe see one less race at Atlanta or move the race back into summer? That certainly could be an option. Or maybe one option I could see is them moving this as a regular season finale. That would be really cool if they did that. I don't want to see maybe Daytona then in the playoffs, maybe move Daytona July, but I think it'd be really cool to see them do that. As for the start of the year with the TV ratings, I think another big reason why we're seeing the basis increase is, one, people probably saw the finish and were interested with how good the race was. But number two, the other big reason is because of the fact that you see the Netflix games. Obviously, with the Netflix TV show, NASCAR Full Speed, I think that's another reason why you have more interest from fans. We've been seeing growth on social media, especially when it comes to that, and I think that's playing a big role. Do I think this increase continues throughout the year? I think there's a chance of possibility it does. I think a lot of fans, and also I think the broadcasts are helping too. At least for the Cup side of things, I think the TV broadcasts have also gotten a lot better. and especially with Kevin Harvick being up in the booth, I think Kevin Harvick has overall done an amazing and good job up in the Fox Sports booth. So to me, I'm really excited about this, and I'm glad to see the Atlanta TV ratings are up for sure. I just hope that this momentum can continue going into the rest of the season, because we need a lot of momentum as a sport. Hopefully, with how good the TV ratings are this week, they can continue at Las Vegas Motor Speedway for all 3 series, because for this year especially, outside of the Daytona 500, all the events have been up this year, which means I think that the sport is headed into a really prosperous and a really good direction, especially going into next year. We're probably going to have a decrease in TV ratings at the start of that TV contract. We need to have increases, and so far this year, we're off to a really solid footing, all things considered. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Daniel Suarez once again. Now, there's been a lot of conversation surrounding Daniel Suarez over this offseason, over the course of the last couple months. The big reason is surrounding Daniel Suarez's contract. Now, after Daniel Suarez was able to win at Atlanta Motor Speedway on Sunday, a lot of people were asking if Daniel Suarez would get a contract extension. Well, Justin Marks confirmed in the media center that this is a contract year for Daniel Suarez. But he does mention that they're working on stuff behind the scenes. Now, talking about Daniel Suarez, he also kind of said that Daniel Suarez on the hot seat, he really didn't feel like Daniel Suarez really was on the hot seat. But the reason a lot of people like myself have kind of felt like that Daniel Suarez was on the hot seat was because of the fact you look at the drivers they just signed recently. They signed Shane Van Gisbergen, who's coming off having a top 5 finish at Atlanta Motor Speedway and is learning very, very quickly and getting up to speed very quickly at a very fast rate. They also signed Zane Smith, who's driving for Spire with the Trackhouse Alliance. He won the Truck Series Championship in 2022 and had a pretty solid year in 2023 and had some pretty good Cup race runs last year as well, though the season for him has not gotten off to a really good start. And they also just signed Connor Zilic, who had just won his class in Rolex 24, being the second youngest winner in the history of that event, as the other driver was not much younger than him. And then, of course, he just won some Trans Am races as well and is going to make his Xfinity Truck Series debut at some point this year, though the races have not been announced at this point. That's why for Daniel Suarez, he has a lot of pressure. I think this win really helps him, and I think he is going to get a contract extension. He's not auditioning for his job, but he really needed to have a good start to the year, and I think this win, it really bumps up his chances of staying at Trackhouse Racing, probably from about 50%, probably up to 75 to 80%. If he gets another win with Trackhouse Racing this year, which I think he wants to win more races this year, and Matt Swiderski is a really good crew chief, by the way, to have. I know Brett Griffin was mentioning this, that Matt Swiderski worked with Elon Musk, which is probably going to help in a big way. I think that Daniel Suarez likely will stay in the 99 car next year, though. I don't think he's going anywhere anytime soon. Now, could they move him around to different teams? Is certainly possible. But I think for Daniel Suarez, for him to get this win in one of the greatest finishes in NASCAR Cup Series history, I think it really helps his stock and really is going to help him stay at at Trackhouse Racing going into the future. Though I know that there's a lot of pressure because Ross is saying he isn't going anywhere. He's also got sponsorship from Busch Beer, so he's going nowhere anytime soon. I don't see him going anywhere, that being Daniel Suarez. I think he's going to be staying at Trackhouse Racing for the long-term future, and I wouldn't be shocked, surprised in the coming months that he gets an extension, because I think that Trackhouse is going to keep Daniel Suarez. He's been way too good of a driver recently. He's had a good start to the year. He got that win in Atlanta. He's locking the playoffs basically at this point. If he has really good runs the rest of the year and starts running good like Vegas, like his teammate Chastain has done in the past, I think that Daniel Suarez will be staying at Trackhouse for the long-term future, especially after picking up that win with the team at Atlanta Motor Speedway on Sunday evening. And now we're going to jump on to the first of 2 major stories in today's episode, as we're talking about Hendrick Motorsports. As it was announced yesterday that Hendrick Motorsports will be returning to the NASCAR Xfinity Series once again in 2024. They are going to run 10 NASCAR Xfinity Series races this season. William Byron is going to drive 4 of these races. He'll race at Phoenix next weekend. Then he's going to race at Darlington in May. Then he'll race at Pocono, I believe, in July or August. And then he'll race at Watkins Glen in August or September. Then you'll have Kyle Larson run 2 races this year of Hendrick Motorsports. He is going to run a Circuit of the Americas in March. And then he'll run the Chicago Street Course in July. Then the next one will be Chase Elliott. He is going to run Darlington as well, I believe in the spring as well. And I think he's also going to run at Charlotte as well, actually Darlington in the fall, and then he's going to run at Charlotte as well. Then Alex Bowman is going to run at New Hampshire, and then Boris Said is going to get a one-off start at Sonoma Raceway. I was wondering if Hendrick Motorsports was going to be bringing back their Xfinity Series program with the number 17, obviously a homage to Ricky Hendrick. I was wondering if they were going to be bringing back the number 17 car. But good news for Hendrick Motorsports fans, they are bringing this car back. This car ran, I think, around 5 or 6 races last year. They actually had Boris Said was supposed to run one of these races at the Charlotte Roval. Obviously failed to qualify because of engine trouble and engine issues that came in during practice. So I'm really glad to see him get a chance and opportunity. And then, of course, Roger Crew made a select start with this team at Phoenix, where he ran really good. I'm a little shocked, surprised at considering how high Hendrick Motorsports really rates Raja. I'm a little shocked he's not making a start at this point. I'd imagine that Raja will get an opportunity and chance. As for the expectations for this car, I would imagine this car will get a win this year. I know they have not won a race yet up to this point. In the last couple years, they've ran this car. But you look at William Byron's schedule, for example. Phoenix, really good track for William Byron historically. Yes, there's some good competition running like the Junior Motorsports cars, but I'd imagine that Phoenix is going to be a track he can win. Darlington, William Byron's been pretty good there as well. Pocono, a track where William Byron ran solidly as well in the past. And then, of course, Watkins Glen. William Byron won the last Cup Series race there, so I'd imagine William Byron will be one of the favorites there. Then you look at Kyle Larson's races. Kyle Larson is solid at COTA. Not amazing at COTA, but he's been pretty solid there. And a 17 car almost won the race last year for William Byron. Chicago, Larson had one of the best cars in the Cup Series race. I think he's absolutely going to be one of the favorites. He's not the favorite to win, in my opinion. He's still got to give that to Shane Van Gisbergen up to this point. I think he's got a shot there. Then you look at Chase Elliott. I think Chase Elliott almost could be the weakest one here at this point. But again, Darlington, a good track for Elliott historically, and Charlotte, a really good track for Chase Elliott. Then you've got Alex Bowman, New Hampshire. To be honest, this probably actually might be the weakest performance out of the team because Alex Bowman has not been great in New Hampshire. I think they're trying to give him a little more experience at that track because Bowman, like I said, has historically not been amazing there. And then going back to Boris Said at Sonoma. He won a Truck Series race there about 25 or 30 years ago, so I would not be surprised if Boris Said goes ahead and wins at Sonoma. But again, I think it's just exciting to see that Hendrick Motorsports is bringing back their Xfinity Series program. But I would have loved to see them get some drivers out of nowhere, maybe get like Carl Edwards out of retirement. I thought that would have been really cool if they found a way to get Carl Edwards to drive a Hendrick car, considering many years ago there was rumor that Carl Edwards was going to go to Hendrick Motorsports. Maybe get a driver like Matt DiBenedetto a chance and opportunity, considering the fact that Matt DiBenedetto still doesn't have a ride at this point for 2024, though I know he's trying to find a ride at this point. It would have been really cool to see him get a chance there. But at the same token, same time, I'm excited to see that Hendrick is bringing back their Xfinity program, and we'll see if they can go out there and win races in 2024 in Xfinity. They've come close to winning. I know they want to win with the 17 car really bad. I think they're going to have a chance and opportunity to do that, but we'll see if they can, in fact, end up doing that with the drivers they have in the selected group they have for this year and for this season in the Xfinity Series, which they've got all 4 of their Cup drivers, and Boris Said, I think they have a really great chance and a really strong opportunity to get that done this year and this season in the Xfinity Series, because Xfinity is a lot more competitive this year. I've talked about in the past. You've got Allmendinger back there this year. You've got Shane Van Gisbergen, Haley Deegan, Chandler Smith, Sheldon Creek, even Frankie Muniz in the series this year. There's a lot of competition, but I think Hendrick Motorsports is absolutely up for the challenge and up for the runs this year in the Xfinity Series. And also the Xfinity Series is a lot different than the Cup Series at this point. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Stewart-Haas Racing. As it was announced yesterday that Stewart-Haas Racing has received penalties. The number 10, which is of course driven by Noah Gragson, and the 41 car, which of course is driven by Ryan Preece, have been issued L1 penalties for improper roof deflectors. It is 35 driver points and owner's points for the 10 and the 41. That means that Noah Gragson currently is at negative 6 points, meaning that we have more points than Noah Gragson, and Ryan Preece has 0 points, meaning that we have the same amount of points as Ryan Preece. Obviously, on Friday, it was announced that NASCAR had confiscated the roof rail deflectors, and they were expected to be handed penalties. But these penalties are still, while they're not absolutely as massive as we've seen other SHR penalties in the past, this is still pretty big penalties. Now, the reason they're not getting an L2 or L3 penalty is because of the fact that Stewart-Haas Racing made these roof rail deflectors in-house, if these had been single source vendor parts, they'd be getting L2 or L3 penalties. But even then, this is still pretty significant because you look at Stewart-Haas Racing, they have a lot of pressure going into this year. They still don't have a contract signed with Ford past this year, and there's a good chance they may not even stay with Ford after this year and might not get as much support considering Hendrick Motorsports just signed with them. Look, Stewart-Haas Racing is absolutely getting crucified on Twitter because you know those posts they basically said we do things our own way. Well, you look at SHR, this is now the third year in a row that this organization has been caught. In the last 18 months, Stewart-Haas Racing has been hit with tons of major penalties. You go back to 2022 when Kevin Harvick got a 100-point penalty for basically messing with certain single-source parts. You then had Cole Custer get hit with a 100-point penalty for race manipulation. Then you had Chase Briscoe last year got an L3 penalty for having a part in the car with slow. And now you have another penalty. You got Kevin Harvick who also got disqualification for the windshield fasteners not being secure after finishing second across the line at Talladega. And then, of course, you have now Stewart-Haas Racing getting hit with another penalty. This is an organization and team that has not been very, very fast. And I understand that they're trying to find a way to be a little more competitive. But at the same token, at the same time, you can't be messing with certain parts on these cars because they want the field to be equal. And what's really sad about this and what really is frustrating for them is the fact they're not competitive right now. They're not doing good. They're running really, really bad and really mediocre, which is why this move for them to keep making these moves is really costing them in the long run. And again, I mentioned it already at this point, there's a lot of pressure on Stewart-Haas Racing to really step up and run a lot better. They're not performing very good right now. They lost their star driver in Kevin Harvick, and they lost sponsorship with Busch Beer. They lost Eric Almirola, who's at Joe Gibbs Racing now, and of course, he lost Smithfield as well. And Derek has said, if they can't sign an extension with Ford, they're going to lose a lot of sponsorship. And there's already some talk and chatter they may lose a charter at some point this year. And again, SHR has been clowned on so much in the last couple of years, and I know they're trying to prove everybody wrong, but the fact that they keep making moves like this is really going to cost this team in the long run. And they should know better at this point. We're in year number 3 of the next-gen car. And if they continue messing with these parts and they keep cheating it up, this team is going to continue to fall down in a big way. And they need to figure out why they got to stop doing this if they're going to continue to be competitive. Because like I've already mentioned and said, SHR is already behind the 8 ball right now. None of their drivers are currently in the playoffs, and nobody expects any of their drivers to make the playoffs at this point. I still think Josh Berry's got a really good chance to go ahead and win Rookie of the Year. But their driver core isn't great. They had opportunities to get drivers like Zane Smith. They had opportunities to get drivers like Kyle Busch and Kyle Larson, and even drivers like Michael McDowell, who's been really good with front row. And now there's rumors, like I said, of speculation that they're not going to stay with Ford. And again, this does not help their circumstances. And of course, maybe some of the Ford teams are using some of the stuff that SHR was using, but probably right now Stewart-Haas Racing is the 4th best Ford organization and team. And this is a team that's been cheating for years. Even when they were competitive, you go back to 2018, Kevin Harvick got 2 major penalties and got 2 encumbered wins at Vegas and then, of course, at Texas and got a massive points penalty because of both of these. It's just so frustrating for Stewart-Haas Racing fans to watch. And I feel for SHR fans to watch this team continue to fall to the ground in major ways. Things have got to change for this organization really quickly because otherwise, like I mentioned, they're going to lose their support from Ford. And it's just really frustrating to watch as a fan. So hopefully they stop making moves like this. They're not going to appeal, to my understanding. They only have a couple days to appeal it because, again, they could only maybe go back down to like 20 points, which would be less significant and at least be in a positive points direction. But at this point, they're already behind the 8 ball. Noah Gragson was like 27. Now he's like 32nd, 33rd behind everybody in points at this point. Hell, I think they're both behind drivers like David Reagan and Jimmy Johnson at this point, who've only ran 1 race this year. And Jimmy Johnson crashed out at Daytona. So, I mean, it's not been a good start to the year for this team. Hopefully they can turn the corner, but the fact they got hit by a pretty big penalty is really significant, and this team is in the gutter currently at the moment. So, that is going to today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram as per on Patreon as well. Let's go below that and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. What are your thoughts about Stewart-Haas Racing handed massive penalties? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about all their stories to talk about today on the channel, including Hendrick Motorsports' Xfinity program? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Later today on the channel, I have the NASCAR Xfinity Series race picks for Las Vegas Motor Speedway. Tomorrow on the channel, I have the Cup Series race picks for Vegas and the paint skin video dropping as well. If any major news breaks tomorrow, there'll be video dropping. And then on Friday, we'll have another NASCAR news video, and we'll also have reactions to qualifying as well on the channel. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.